The grand chamber of Ethelgard Station was less a room and more a captured idea of perfection. There were no visible walls, only seamless, kilometers-long curves of glowing, immaculate crystal that resonated with a faint, harmonic hum. Light was not cast from a source, but simply existed. It was an ambient, shadowless luminescence that filled the vast space. Floating geometric data constructs, cubes and spheres of pure information, drifted through the air like lazy thoughts. This was the domain of the Lumine, and the chamber was the ultimate expression of their philosophy. A universe governed by pure, crystalline logic, detached from the messy chaos of matter. At the center of this sterile beauty stood High Counselor Valerius. His tall, faceted body was a masterpiece of living crystal. The light within him shifted. In slow, placid waves of brilliant blue, the color of serene confidence. He gestured with a slender, crystalline limb towards a holographic document that hovered in the air before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Concordance. "We convene today," Valerius intoned, his voice a series of perfectly modulated chimes, translated instantly into 1,000 languages, "to contemplate the peculiarities of the new candidate species, the Terrans." A wave of polite, amused energy rippled through the delegates. "I present their foundational legal text, submitted for our review, the Soul Accords," Valerius continued. He magnified a section of the text. "Observe, Article 37. A prohibition on killing or injuring an opponent who, having laid down his arms, or having no longer means of defense, has surrendered at discretion. That they must legislate such basic decency speaks volumes about their developmental stage." A low chittering sound came from Strategos Kthar, a warrior delegate of the Chiton. His formidable insectoid frame, polished to a mirror shine, was rigid with a warrior's pride. "It is the reasoning of primitives, High Counselor," his translator boomed. "Fearful, devious. My species' code of combat is a single edict. Fight with honor, die with honor. These mud-dwellers seem to require a library of rules just to prevent them from stabbing each other in the back." The Strategos tapped a sharp claw on another projection, this one detailing a rule against the improper use of a flag of truce. "They have a rule against feigning surrender. This implies it is a strategy they have actually employed. They are a species without honor." A Signian scholar, a bird-like creature with iridescent feathers, rustled its wings. "Most fascinating. It reads less like a legal framework and more like a list of superstitions. A catalog of taboos from a pre-rational culture. I am eager to hear their historian's explanation of these cultural artifacts." Valerius's internal light softened to a patronizing violet. "Indeed, it is our duty as the elder species to show patience. Let us hope their designated historian can illuminate us on these curiosities. We would not wish to misinterpret their primitive philosophies before granting them associate status." The unspoken sentiment hung in the perfect air. This would be a short, amusing meeting before the real work of the Concordance could continue. The grand doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a soundless parting of light. A single figure walked through. His heavy footsteps echoed in the resonant space, a stark contrast to the silent gliding of the other delegates. This was Elias Thorne. He was a man of middling height and age, with a quiet demeanor and a network of fine lines around his eyes. These lines spoke of long hours spent squinting at either distant suns or tiny schematics. His Terran Colonial Authority uniform was a simple, functional jumpsuit of dark gray canvas. Its pockets were reinforced, and its seams were triple-stitched. It was the garment of a man who worked with tools, not words. His hands, clasped loosely before him, were thick with callus that he paused just inside the chamber. His calm, blue eyes scanned the vast, curved ceiling not with awe, but with the appraising gaze of a man checking for load-bearing weaknesses or potential stress fractures. His presence felt intensely physical, a dense note of matter and biology in a room dedicated to ephemeral logic. He gave a polite, almost imperceptible nod to the council at large before walking toward the central platform. High Counselor Valerius glided forward, his internal light pulsing with patronizing courtesy. "We welcome you, representative of the Terran species," he chimed. His translator smoothed the tones into a welcoming flow. His gaze drifted over Thorne's simple attire and unassuming posture. A primitive, as expected, Valerius thought. His internal logic felt a sense of satisfying confirmation. This will be brief. We are most grateful for your time, Historian Thorn. Valerius continued aloud. As you know, we seek to understand the unique philosophical underpinnings of your species, as detailed in your Soul Accords. We would be honored if you could illuminate us on this fascinating cultural document. Elias Thorne stopped before the counselor and offered a friendly, slightly weary smile. It was a disarming expression, utterly devoid of the pomp and gravity that saturated the chamber. Happy to clear things up, Counselor, Thorne replied. His voice was a low, even baritone that the translators rendered without embellishment. It can get a mite complicated if you don't have the context. Strategos Kthar's heavy forelimbs thudded against the crystalline floor as he stepped forward. His multifaceted eyes were fixed on the small human. With a flick of his claw, he isolated a new clause on the holographic display. It was from Protocol I, Article 2. The use of any weapon the primary effect of which is to injure by fragments which in the human body escape detection by X-rays 1 is prohibited. The chitin's translator boomed, filling the chamber with indignant sound. Explain this. Your species requires a law to forbid the use of coward's dust. A warrior's blow should be clean, decisive. To strike with unseen slivers is the tactic of vermin, not warriors. A soft chuckle escaped Elias Thorne's lips. It was a sound so out of place it drew the attention of every delegate. Oh, that old thing. Funny story that. He looked at the hulking insectoid. His expression was that of a man sharing a mildly amusing workplace anecdote. There was a bit of trouble on a colony world, Proxima B. Local insurgents got creative. Started packing their homemade explosives with fiberglass shards, ground up, ceramics, even glass from shattered bottles. He paused, his eyes holding a distant look. A kinetic blast is one thing. Nasty, but our field medics can handle it. The scanners pick up the metal fragments, the surgical bots pull them out, and the soldier is back in the fight in a week, or at least alive. But glass? Ceramics? They don't show up on scans. You have to go in by hand. I saw a surgeon a good one spend 12 hours pulling microscopic slivers out of a kid's lung, only to miss one the size of a grain of sand. The kid died a week later from the internal bleeding. Thorne's gaze returned to Kthar, his smile still gentle. We didn't ban it because it was cowardly, Strategos. We banned it because it was inefficient. It created a logistical nightmare for our medical corps. The rule is there to save our doctors time. The chamber, for the first time, was utterly silent. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by a tense confusion. Strategos Kthar's huge mandibles clicked together softly, a gesture of deep uncertainty. Beside him, High Counselor Valerius's internal light, once a placid blue, had shifted to a troubled, flickering lavender. The first crack had appeared in their perfect, logical universe. High Counselor Valerius, attempting to wrestle the conversation back onto a predictable philosophical track, raised a calming hand. The turbulent lavender light within him stabilized back to a more authoritative violet. A fascinating, if grim, clarification, Engineer Thorne. It seems your accords are rooted in pragmatism. Let us then examine another article. He projected Article 35 into the air, its elegant script glowing before them. The employment of weapons, projectiles, and material and methods of warfare of a nature to cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering is prohibited. Valerius turned to the assembly. Here, we see the seed of true civilized thought. A. Recognition of shared sentience. A moral line drawn. This, surely, is proof of your species' emerging compassion. Elias Thorne pulled out a simple, rugged datapad from a pocket in his jumpsuit. Its casing was scuffed and scarred. With a few taps of his calloused thumb, he brought up a simple schematic. Well, that's the poetry of it, isn't it? He said. His voice as mild as ever. The keywords there are superfluous and unnecessary. That implies there's a whole category of injury and suffering that our lawyers have deemed perfectly, legally, necessary. He projected his own hologram from the datapad. It was a crude, functional wireframe that stood in stark contrast to the elegant constructs of the Lumine. It showed two projectiles. On the left, Thorne began, his tone shifting to that of a lecturer explaining a favorite subject. You have your standard kinetic penetrator. A simple piece of jacketed metal. It goes in, it comes out. Very clean. Pokes a neat hole. If it doesn't hit anything vital, the target might not even notice for a few seconds. That's what you'd use for, let's call it, necessary injury. He then gestured to the second projectile, which had a small cavity at its tip. Now this one is the reason for that rule. This is an expanding round. See the hollow point? On impact, that tip causes the projectile to deform, to flatten out. It doesn't poke a hole. It creates a massive cavity. The real beauty, though, he said, his eyes gleaming with the pride of a craftsman, is the hydrostatic shock. All the kinetic energy, instead of passing through, is dumped directly into the target's body. A fluid medium, like most biological organisms, isn't compressible. So that shockwave radiates outwards, rupturing organs, tearing tissue, creating maximum terminal damage far from the actual wound channel. Utterly devastating. He looked up at the silent council. We decided that was superfluous. Mostly. A wave of revulsion, a palpable psychic disturbance, rippled through the chamber. The Signian scholar was scribbling frantically, its feathered hand trembling. Strategos Kthares' mandibles were clenched so tight, they emitted a faint grinding sound. This obsession with maximizing internal mutilation was the very definition of dishonor. It was the work of butchers, not warriors. A junior luminade, a being of frantic, flickering white light, glided hastily to Valerius's side. It projected a private data stream directly into the High Counselor's consciousness. The text has been amended 17 times since its first ratification, the aide communicated. His own internal light pulsed with distress. 17 major. Annexes. Valerius's crystalline form seemed to grow colder. He dismissed the aide and turned his full attention back to Thorn. Our archivists have just noted that your soul accords are not a static document. They have been updated. Frequently. Why would a foundational text of ethics require such constant revision? For the first time, a genuine grin spread across Elias Thorne's face. It was not a smile of warmth, but of sad, weary amusement, like a man recalling the follies of a clever but troublesome child. Because folks kept finding loopholes, he said. Take fire, for example. We have very specific rules about incendiary weapons. You'd think don't set people on fire would be a pretty straightforward rule, but it isn't. Flamethrowers, for instance, aren't technically banned. They're area denial and anti-fortification tools. But we had to make very specific rules. About, say, not using them against personnel in a sealed environment, like a bunker or a starship corridor. He paused, letting them absorb that. But the real fun started when a mining company on Mars was trying to develop a more efficient explosive for pulverizing rock. They had a happy accident. Created a device that dispersed a fine mist of fuel into the air and then ignited it. It created this massive, rolling fireball that consumed all the oxygen in a huge area. Thorne's eyes had a faraway look, one of professional appreciation. Didn't burn a soul, but it created a near-perfect vacuum. A negative pressure wave. Ruptured every lung in a half-mile radius. The lawyers had a field day with that one, he said, the grin returning. Is it fire if the damage is from pressure? Is it an explosive if the primary kill mechanism is asphyxiation? We had to add a whole new annex just to define thermobaric effects. A wave of pure, cold fear washed over the chamber. It was a silent, intellectual terror that was far more profound than any primal dread. These humans weren't just violent. They were litigious about their violence. This wasn't a history of their ethics. It was the documented, ongoing, terrifying arms race that humanity was having with itself. The rules weren't to control their savagery. They were to classify it. Strategos Kthares' powerful legs shifted. His weight created a deep thrumming. In the crystalline floor, his warrior's mind, accustomed to the rigid logic of honorable combat, was failing to process the human's terrifying mindset. This is perverse, the chitin delegate boomed. His translator struggled to convey a complex mixture of disgust and confusion. A weapon has a purpose. A blade is for cutting. A kinetic rifle is for firing. They are tools of a warrior's will. They are not toys for lawyers and engineers to endlessly redefine. Elias Thorne gave a sympathetic shrug, as if acknowledging a reasonable but ultimately naive point of view. Oh, anything's a weapon if you're in a tight spot, Strategos, he said, his voice gentle. It's all about perspective. He tapped his rugged datapad again. The wireframe of the hollow point bullet was replaced by a new image. A small, harmless-looking drone with wide, gull-like wings and a large tank on its underbelly. See this? Harmless-looking thing. It's a commercial AG-7 drone. We use them for dusting crops on our agri-worlds. Spreads fertilizer, pesticides, that sort of thing. He then overlaid a transparent schematic of a chitin warship, much like the one Kthar himself commanded. A simulation began. The little drone flew not towards the ship's armored hull, but towards the massive atmospheric intake vents that fed the engines and life support systems. The drone released a fine, gray mist. That powder, Thorne explained, his tone that, of a farmer discussing soil composition, is a stable, non-toxic mix of simple iron oxide and aluminum dust. Rust and aluminum shavings, basically. Inert. You could eat it. It wouldn't taste good, but it wouldn't kill you. But when that non-toxic, non-explosive dust hits the high-energy plasma filters and electrostatic scrubbers in your standard ship engine, the simulation showed the fine powder being sucked into the ship's systems. As it hit the energized filters, it flashed white-hot. Well, you get a lovely thermite reaction, Thorne said, a hint of professional admiration in his voice. Burns at about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Melts the entire drive and life support system from the inside out. Turns a warship into a dead, silent tomb in about 15 seconds. He shut off the hologram. We had to make a very specific rule about weaponizing agricultural equipment after a bit of trouble on the Proxima B colony. This was the true turning point. The quiet, profound horror in the chamber solidified. This wasn't about bigger guns or faster ships. It was about a mindset that could look at a tool for growing food and see a way to boil a ship's crew alive inside there. On hull, High Counselor Valerius's crystalline form was now a deep, stormy purple. His internal light flickered erratically, like lightning trapped in a bottle. The delegates finally understood. Human ingenuity wasn't for building things up. It was for figuring out how to tear things down at their most fundamental, unexpected level. The Signian scholar, who had been scribbling frantically throughout the presentation, suddenly froze. Its head cocked to one side as it processed data. From the Concordance network, its iridescent feathers stood on end. With a strangled squawk, it scurried towards the central platform. Its clawed feet skittered on the pristine floor. It held up its datapad to High Counselor Valerius, its wings trembling. Valerius lowered his gaze to the pad. For a being of pure, logical light, the effect was shockingly violent. His internal light did not just flicker. It flashed a convulsive strobe of stormy purple and stark, terrified white. The harmonious hum of the chamber seemed to sour, dropping a full octave. He raised his head slowly. The focus of his being was fixed on the unassuming human. When he spoke, his voice modulator crackled with static, failing to smooth the trembling terror in his transmission. Your service record. It has been cross-referenced with your species' public patent archives. The words came out haltingly, as if the very concept was painful to articulate. It does not list you as a historian. Your designation was Conceptual Design Engineer, Annex Projects Division. A collective gasp, a sharp intake of a dozen different atmospheres, echoed in the chamber. Your signature, Valerius whispered, the sound scraping through the chamber's perfect acoustics, is on the patent filings for the thermobaric application and the agricultural variant. Elias Thorne's friendly, folksy smile did not waver. It remained fixed in place, but the warmth vanished from it entirely. It left behind a chilling, placid mask. His eyes, for the first time, went completely cold. Their calm blue hardened into something ancient and absolute. I never said I was a historian, counselor, he said, his voice soft, yet carrying to every corner of the silent room. I said I'd clear things up. Figured it was best to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. He looked around at the horrified faces, the flickering lights, the trembling appendages. It was my job to dream up these things, he stated, as simply as if he were saying it was his job to bake bread. I had to think of the worst things we could possibly do to each other, just so we could write a rule against it, and have a plan for it, in case someone else had the same idea. The final, horrifying truth descended upon the chamber. This was not a chronicler of monsters. This was not a soldier who had witnessed them. This was their architect. This was the mind that birthed the nightmares. Strategos Cthar, the proud warrior of an undefeated race, took a heavy, involuntary step backward. A ripple of pure, primal fear finally broke through his warrior's frame. The pristine chamber was now a place of quiet, systemic chaos. Soft, insistent alarms, previously unheard of on Ethelgard, began to chime as threat indices were updated across the entire Concordance network. Red alert icons, stark and brutal, blinked on previously serene holographic displays. Delegates were no longer seated, but stood in panicked clusters. They whispered in their native tongues, their translators unable to keep up with the frantic exchange of fear and disbelief. The room's harmonious hum had been replaced by a discordant symphony of dread. Through it all, Elias Thorne remained. An island of calm. He methodically wiped his simple datapad with a cloth from his pocket, powered it down, and slid it back into his jumpsuit. He gave the assembled, terrified council one last polite nod, as if concluding a routine maintenance report, and turned to leave. His soft, heavy footsteps echoed in the suddenly vast space. Engineer Thorne. The voice was a mere whisper, a crackle of static from the High Counselor's modulator. Thorne stopped at the threshold, his back to the chamber. All of this. Valerius's voice trembled, the logic of his being fractured beyond repair. These rules, these applications. This madness. Why? Why are you like this? Elias Thorne looked back over his shoulder. His folksy smile was long gone. His face was now a mask of profound, ancient weariness. It was the face of a species that had stared into its own abyss for millennia. Because the most dangerous thing in this universe, Thorne said, his voice low and heavy with truth, is a human who has run out of options. The soul accords aren't a list of things we forbid ourselves from doing. They're a catalog of our capabilities. A reminder, written in blood and law, of what we're capable of when we are pushed. He turned fully. His calm eyes swept across the chamber one last time. They're not for you, he stated. They're for us. They're the leash we put on ourselves. And you should all pray to whatever gods you hold dear that you never, ever give us a reason to take it off. He turned again and walked out of the chamber of echoes. His soft footsteps were the only sound that mattered, leaving a universe of silent, newly educated aliens in his wake. 3 days later, the Galactic Concordance reconvened in the Grand Chamber. The air of serene superiority was gone, replaced by a somber, funereal silence. The ambient hum was lower, more cautious. The delegates no longer floated with easy confidence. They remained in their designated zones, their movements minimal and deliberate. High Counselor Valerius stood at the center of the room. The brilliant blues and purples within his crystalline form were gone. They were replaced by a steady, solemn, functional white light, like a star that had burned past its vibrant youth and settled into a long, weary existence. Without a word, he raised a limb and activated the central holographic display. A new official document materialized in the air. Its script was stark and final. The delegates read it in silence. The document declared the species designation as Terran human. Their new classification was self-regulating apex threat. The threat index was updated to context variable, assume infinite potential. Under diplomatic protocol, the directive was clear. Expedite all reasonable requests. For all unreasonable requests, seek immediate clarification of necessity. A special advisory had been added. Do not, under any circumstances, provide this species with a reason to author a new annex to the Soul Accords. Finally, a new addendum was included. Agricultural and industrial equipment are to be considered dual-use technology. N01 spoke. There was nothing left to say. The last line of the addendum hung in the air, a monument to their shattered arrogance. It was a testament to the terrifying, quiet man who had so politely shown them the true nature of the universe's newest and most frightening superpower. In the quiet, bureaucratic dread, a new order had been born.